Over the last 3 years, I've been building this 2003 Silverado from junkyard parts, and today we're finally installing the twin turbos. Now, when most people boost a Silverado, they'll just use a single turbo, but this time I wanted to go with twins. To me, they're cleaner, they're symmetrical, they look really nice, and we have a pair of turbos that'll support up to 1,500 horsepower at the wheels. So we're tearing things down, we're gonna handle a little bit of fabrication and plumbing, and the goal, by the end of this video, I want to hear our 6.2 LS3 fire up and make some cool turbo sounds. If you've been following along with the build, you'll remember that we built this truck from the ground up using junkyard parts, and we just got the engine fired up and went for the first test drive a few weeks ago. And since then, I've only managed to put around 200 miles on the odometer before tearing it back apart. Now this might seem like wasted effort, since things like the exhaust and air intake systems won't be reused with the twin turbo phase of the project, but those 200 miles of testing was important to me because it did allow me to work out a few bugs with the overall build, signaled a milestone or completion of the first phase of the project. Now, this is only a mental thing for me, but it does give me a boost in motivation to move forward with the project, because if things dragged out any longer without any small payoff, like being able to drive the truck back and forth to work once or twice, it's hard for me to keep moving forward with a project. Oh, that's gonna be a tight fit. Now, I don't know if you guys appreciate how big of a moment this is for me, but I am so excited right now to finally see two turbos mounted under the hood of our Silverado. I mean, you kind of have to stop and stare at it, because this is like 3 years worth of work to get to this point. We started out with a bare frame. We built a truck entirely from junkyard parts that would run and drive, and then we took it back apart again to get to this point. We did a bunch of planning and prep work we already kind of covered over on this side, but thankfully it all fits how we anticipated, because I did all that work without actually having the turbo in place. But the wiring harness, it's got a mile of room, the fuel system's out of the way, the power steering hoses, that all clears. So we're looking good over on the driver's side. The wastegate, we are going to have to do a little bit of fabrication to get it in its final position, but its final home is going to be kind of somewhere in that area down there. Again, there's plenty of space for it. A challenge that we'll have to address at some point, not today, but we have the compressor outlet in the computer kind of sharing the same real estate. We'll move some stuff around in this corner, but yeah, we have a turbo sitting on the driver's side. Passenger side, this is like standard stuff if you were building a single turbo Silverado, because it's in the exact same position. So none of these challenges were unanticipated. This, like I said, standard stuff. We already have the Rowan's Rides AC suction hose and receiver dryer, so plenty of room there. Heater lines we're gonna have to address just because they're tucked away and they kind of touch the manifold and go right in front of the wastegate. But again, we knew that. We're just doing mock-up now. And the coolant tank, I did move that just because the wastegate, I want to match the driver's side. And to do that, it would interfere with the coolant tank. So we'll have to do some work there as well. But again, this is all fairly standard stuff. My main objective for today, though, is just to get the turbos and manifolds permanently mounted up and to get them plumbed with oil. So to do that, we need to take care of some fabrication. Installing a turbo on a Silverado is one of the most popular modifications you can do, and thankfully there is tons of aftermarket support. The manifolds I'm using are designed to fit a T4 turbo under the hood of a 99 and up truck, and the passenger side manifold can be used for a single turbo install or in a twin configuration like I'm doing. You just have to block off the rear inlet. Now, Trick Turbo does provide the needed parts for a bolt-on solution, but since I've got a welder and a good bit of OCD, I figured the better way would be to chop off the unneeded section of the manifold and weld on my own block-off plate. So I grabbed some 1/4 inch thick stainless plate and got to work. The million-dollar question today is, are twin turbos any better than a single? And the answer is the same thing I always tell my son when he asks me an open-ended question, which is, it depends. There is no doubt you can make huge power with a single turbocharger, and it would be much easier to install. My buddy Brent has an extended cab Silverado just like mine, except his runs in the mid-8s in the quarter mile, and he's using a single massive turbo. But there are countless other examples of twin turbo trucks running just as fast, but the difference is in sizing. When combined, the two turbos I chose can produce around 1,500 horsepower at the wheels, and they're considered to be a 66 millimeter in size. But to produce the same amount of power with a single turbo, you'd need something closer to the 85 to 90 millimeter range. As long as the turbos are sized to produce the amount of power you're trying to make, single or twin shouldn't make a ton of difference. Spool up time and overall power level should be comparable, but again, sizing is the most important thing. For me, the choice was simple. The last turbo truck I built had a big single on it, and I don't like doing the same thing twice. So this time around, to give me a challenge and to do something different, I chose to run twin turbos. Even though we're building this truck entirely out of junkyard parts, the interior is actually in really good shape, and I want to keep it that way because this truck is now 23 years old, and interior parts are getting a little bit harder to find. So the carpet specifically, I want to keep that in really good shape. So when Lasfit reached out about wanting to sponsor video, I said, heck yeah, and today we're going to be installing a pair of Lasfit floor liners up front. Now, to me, these are a little bit nicer than just a regular old floor mat because they're bigger. The factory passenger side mat, for example, that just kind of goes under your feet and it collects some of the dirt, but around the edges, that's where all the extra dirt goes into the carpet, and then it seems like it's impossible to get out. So the floor liner has much larger coverage area. And it's cool because it's made from a TPU material, which I had to look it up, but that's kind of like half rubber, half plastic. So it's soft enough where it's grippy, your feet won't slide around, but it's also durable enough where you're not going to wear a hole in it, like the driver's side OEM floor mat has a hole in it. It does have the little grippy thingies underneath too, so it's not going to slide around, and it's super easy to clean. You just, when you get them dirty, pull them out, hose them off, and dry them and put them back in. Like, it could not be simpler than that. So we'll get these installed real quick, but if you want to grab a set of floor liners for your car or truck, check out Lasfit. I'll put some links down and below, but they're actually offering a really good deal you want to take advantage of. They have a 20% off code. You just use LT20, and then you can save 20% off of your purchase. They have floor liners, they have some LED lights and a few other things, but definitely grab a set of floor liners. They'll help keep your carpet clean, which is especially important if you have a 23-year-old junkyard Silverado with a really nice carpet. So one last bit of fabrication before we can permanently install the manifolds onto the engine. We need to weld on a location for the wastegate. Each manifold does have a port actually already in it. That's for like a 2-bolt 39 millimeter wastegate. Nothing wrong with that. We're just going to be running a upgraded 44 millimeter gate. So we need to do a little bit more welding, and then those manifolds can be bolted on for good. But what exactly does a wastegate do? In short, its main job is to keep your engine in one piece by controlling boost pressure. The turbocharger is driven by exhaust energy, but if 100% of the exhaust gases were allowed to spin the turbine, the resulting boost pressure in the intake side would rise to as much as 40 or 50 psi, or probably even more, which would certainly destroy most street engines. Now, of course, this is a bit of a generalization, but a wastegate is kind of like the spillway in a dam. When the drive pressure in the exhaust gets too high, the wastegate opens a little bit and allows a portion to bypass the turbine, which slows down the shaft and regulates turbo speed and ultimately boost pressure. But I just made 2 marks, so that kind of lines up the twist. And then up here, I just kind of keep 2 fingers in between the compressor and the and the side of the wastegate there. The engine I'm running right now is a stock bottom end 6.2 liter L92, which is basically a truck LS3. They're pretty strong and should be able to make close to 1,000 horsepower for a little while, but it's certainly not indestructible. At first, I'll start off around 10 pounds of boost and go up a little from there, but we'll rely on these wastegates to keep our engine running at a safe boost level, which we want to match the strength of the parts inside the engine and of course the octane of the fuel that we're going to be running. Buying these manifolds gave me a huge head start over having to build my own, since they placed the turbos in the perfect spot right out of the gate. But even these small fabrication projects we're doing, like welding the block off plate and mounting the wastegate tubes, can take up a good chunk of time. I'll preach this over and over, but it bears repeating. Take your time and do things to the very best of your ability. I don't care if it's shoveling the driveway or building the space shuttle, but cutting corners or rushing through a job will always come back to bite you in the end. We now have the position of the wastegates finalized on both sides. And in the edit, it probably looked like we just did a one-shot deal, tack welded them on, and we're good to go. But what I didn't show you is I actually redid each side 2 more times, just, a little tweak here and there in terms of rotation and length of the pipe and things like that, just to get it to the point where I was happy with it, because it would have worked, but visually it was not appealing to me. And if my brain doesn't like it, I have to redo it. It doesn't matter how many times, that's just the way that it's gonna be. But at the end, I'm always happy and glad and relieved that we took the extra steps just to get it locked down where we really, really want it, because it's, every time you pop the hood, you're gonna hate it and end up redoing it in the future anyway, or at least I would. But anyway, the passenger side here, it was initially up a little bit closer to the compressor housing, which I didn't like that because in the future, if we ever upsize these turbos, it might have hit. So now it definitely will not hit. We've still got room to get to the bolts and stuff like that. It actually gave us a little more clearance around the AC line too, so great there. And on the driver's side, this one's a little bit harder to see because of the lighting, but we've got plenty of space. And initially this one was rolled downhill, where now I kind of stood it up so it better matched the wastegate tube on that side. So anyway, that's where we're at. I still have to pull the manifolds off and do the final welding, but first there is one more challenge that we have to take care of. That's the oil drain fitting, because we are going to have to build our own. And just with the clocking of the center section and the way the flanges go on the hot side, this is going to be like the most difficult turbo drain that I've ever had to do. So let's get to it. When I made this shirt for Big Blocks and Boost, this truck was originally going to have a twin turbo big block under the hood. But now that we're putting a twin turbo LS, I'm kind of glad we didn't choose the big block for a variety of reasons, but packaging, it would have been extremely difficult to do twin turbo big block under the hood and make it all fit. Definitely doable, but a challenge. Now that we have both of the oil drains sorted out, I've already mapped out the AN hoses. I haven't built them yet, but like that one there, you can see how much of a challenge it was to get out of the turbo, around the wastegate, leave room for the hose around the compressor outlet. We can now finally weld the wastegate tube to the manifold, and then we can permanently install the manifolds to the engine, which means we're almost to the point where we can start it up and hear some cool turbo noises. But there's actually one more side quest we have to complete before we mount the manifolds. But first, let's do some more welding. Well, my argon bottle is just about empty, but thankfully we're able to get all the welding done on the manifolds before we ran out, which means the hot side is done. Now, I gotta say though, without question, this has been one of the most challenging turbo installs that I've taken on in a very, very long time. I did a turbo Miata like 15 years ago, and that was a bit more of a challenge. But the big deal here, or the reason why it's challenging, is because of how close the turbo oil drain has to be to the flange bolt right in there. And then the bolts are almost going to be touching. So when it comes time to permanently all bolt this together, it is going to be a bit of a puzzle. I do have the solution for it, but just wanted to show you all the parts and tell you about what we're using. As far as manifolds, of course, these are from Trick Turbo. They're kind of like the OG when it comes to turbo Silverado stuff. They've been making manifolds for a very long time. They're made from cast stainless steel, which is going to be very durable and robust. It's not going to corrode, it's not going to crack, and it's going to flow more than enough to support our power goals. And of course, they look really cool too. Turbos themselves. These are a GTX 3582R from Summit Racing. It's a dual ball bearing design. It's a 66 millimeter compressor, has a 62 millimeter turbine. And each of these is rated to about 750 horsepower at the wheels. That's kind of like maxed out. But because it has a dual ball bearing design, it's still going to have a really, really quick spool up, which is going to be perfect for our 6.2. They're also water cooled if I want to run coolant through them to keep them nice and cool. To control the boost, we got a pair of 44 millimeter Summit Wastegates. Also cast stainless steel, which is nice because that's going to all match and look really cool. I can't remember. I think they have like a 14-pound spring installed in them. We can, of course, change that up or down. They come with a whole bunch of springs and stuff like that. I'll put links down in the description for the turbos, the manifolds, the wastegates, and all the parts that we're going to be using today, just so if you want to build your own, you can definitely check out what we're using. So, turbo kit is ready, or at least the hot side is ready to go back on the truck. But I did mention there is one side quest that we need to take care of first, and that is sitting right here. So if you're a dad, you'll probably get a kick out of this one. I was informed by my son today as I was cutting these voiceovers that I am officially cringe for using the term side quest. Now, I think it comes from the video game world, which I don't even really play, but I'm gonna keep using it because it so perfectly describes these little side projects that aren't necessarily related to the main job at hand, but really should be done ahead of time. Now, these new motor mounts are stronger than the ones I had, and they'll keep the engine locked in place even with an increase in power and torque, and they're easy to access with a manifold out of the way. Simple as that, a side quest. And finally, after 17 minutes of listening to me ramble on, the modified manifolds can go onto the motor. The MLS gaskets and old bolts will hold things in place, and I needed to change back to the truck-style dipstick to clear the turbo's location. Can't remember why I used a car dipstick on this engine in the first place, but Summit had what I needed, and we're good as new. In order to get these turbos installed and have all the bolts be present and tight and all that good stuff, we have to assemble it in pieces. So I have to take the center section and the compressor off of the turbine housing, install just the turbine housing, and then with it in the truck. This is the challenge. It's doable, but I have to insert the center section and put this little retaining ring on both sides and then tighten the bolts. It's gonna be tough, it's gonna be a pain, but that is the only way I can get this small size compact turbo installed and have the oil drain and all that work. And the kicker is I have to do it with this bolt already in place. Well, if this doesn't work, I'm gonna have a mental breakdown, I think. I've known since day one that this truck was always going to be twin turboed, which is gonna save me a ton of time today because I put in a bunch of prep work while I was assembling. For example, one of the challenges of mounting a turbo on the driver's side of a Silverado is the wiring. The main part of the engine harness normally goes right where the hottest part of the turbocharger is gonna sit, and melted wires wouldn't mean you were not going anywhere. But a few months back, I completely reworked the entire engine harness to add some length and move the wires out of the way. It took about a week to do, which was frustrating at the time, but today it's gonna leave us with plenty of room to work with, and we don't have to worry about melting any wires. Not sure if you guys realize this, but the entire fate of this video, coming out on time, rests solely in the hands of an Amazon driver with two 60-degree 10AN fittings. I can't start it up until I have those. and it's snowing outside. So wish me luck. Well, this is the moment of truth. I have crossed all my T's, dotted all my I's, made sure all the fittings are tight, all the bolts are secured, there's no extra hardware laying around that we don't know what it should do. And it's time to hear this twin turbo junkyard Silverado come to life for the very first time. As a twin turbo, of course, we've already heard the 6.2 run. Now, it might not seem like it, but we have accomplished quite a bit today. I mean, we removed all the factory stuff. We have the twin turbos installed, did all the fabrication for the manifolds, got our wastegates mounted, have the oil lines ran to and from the turbos. Everything, of course, plumbed with this silicone heat wrap. Nothing is secured. I still have to do some tidying up and things like that. And the oil drain on the driver's side, I have to redo because I was waiting for a 45 or a 60-degree fitting. I only had 45. So I just temporarily put a hose on there, which I am going to redo. And yeah, there's a lot left to do before this is truly a twin turbocharged running and driving project, but we'll talk more about that later. For now, I want to hear this thing run. It is so invigorating to hear the first fire up of a twin turbo, anything really. And it just kind of gets me pumped and motivated for the rest of this build. But we're not ready for our first test drive just yet. There are a ton of things that we have to cross off the list before we can do that. There's 4 major systems left to go. Number 1 is the cooling system. For example, the heater lines right now are just like bungee corded out of the way so they didn't touch the manifold for the first start. We're going to reroute those with some different types of hose up and around the turbo. The coolant tank right now is just like haphazardly set in the corner. And I probably am going to take advantage of the water cooling on the turbos as well, since we're going to be in there. Then we have the charge air cooler side of things, because we got to get the boost from the turbo into the engine. We're going to mount an air-to-air intercooler up here. There's going to be a ton of fabrication for that. We have the exhaust that we need to take care of, and I'm probably going to do 2 systems for that. One, we'll just do a full quote-unquote street style of exhaust with mufflers and tailpipes and all that good stuff. I still want it to sound kind of rowdy, but streetable. And then I'm probably going to build a hood exit system just because why not? Not with my good HD hood, but I'll use the blue 03 hood that we have. And then finally, there's the fuel system, because right now the engine just has the stock L92 injectors and only a 255 liter per hour pump. We did already upgrade to 10AN fuel lines and a bypass regulator, but neither the pump nor the injectors are going to be big enough to run with really any boost, so we'll have to upgrade that stuff as well. 4 major systems to go. Snowing today, so I'm not really feeling the pressure, but summer and drag racing season is going to be here before we know it. So if you want to see how this build turns out, you're going to have to subscribe to the channel, drop a like, do all that good stuff. But thank you guys for watching. Thank you to Lasfit for helping out on today's video. So check those guys out if you have, you need some floor mats or LED bulbs or any of that good stuff. And come back soon, because there is never a shortage of truck-related things to do. Thanks. Catch you later.